All right, hey folks, Eli here, and in this video we're going to be essentially going over a quick start on how to use the Xano Connector plugin and manage users, your Xano users in your Bubble app, as well as retrieve data from your Xano database and display it in your Bubble app. So now, if you're new to my channel, and you like this kind of educational content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We'll have more training on Xano and Bubble connections coming up here in the future. So definitely go ahead and hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when those new videos come out. But we're going to go ahead and jump in. So we are starting with a brand new Bubble app. And we're going to set up a brand new workspace in Xano to connect to. So we're not going to go into a lot of Bubble workflows and all that as far as how to actually build in Bubble. I'm assuming you know how to build in Bubble. That's not the point of this video, but we'll be diving into each step for how to sign a user up, how to log a user in, log the user out, and then how to actually collect data or bring in data from Xano and use what I call virtual data types in your Bubble app to manage all that data, display it, and etc. So go ahead in the plugin tab here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to click on Add Plugins, and this plugin is right at the very top for me since it's a private plugin. But it'll be there in the main marketplace. So just type in Xano Connector. It'll come up, click install, and then we also want to install the API connector. Oof. All right, go ahead and click install on that as well. And we'll get into why we need the API connector later. We use that to create our virtual data types so that we can actually return data that's usable inside the Bubble editor point and click expressions process. But for now, we'll just go ahead and click on Xano Connector. And you can see there's a lot of, there's a big description here going through the different elements and actions, kind of giving a rundown of what each one does. We're going to jump in. We're going to go through all this tonight, and you should understand how to set up a basic implementation of this. So, in the plugin settings, there's two options you can set. One is the group URL, and then the other one is the data source. So, often if you're building an app, you're going to be testing in a test database in Xano, and so you can set the test database by just typing test here, and all the calls that are made through this plugin will automatically interact with the test data source in your Xano workspace. For this demo, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be using the live data source in the Xano workspace. So the group URL then, this is referencing an API group. So to go into that, let's go ahead, jump over here to Xano. We're going to click create a new workspace, and let's go ahead and set this up. We'll say Bubble, and we're going to start fresh. Click get started. We'll call this Xano Connector demo. Hit continue. We're going to click start from scratch. We'll leave user as the one table that we need, and you leave the your API clicked here so that Xano will create our endpoints for us. Click continue. We're going to skip this, and then we'll say we're going to specify our users table, right? If you had created multiple tables that you could select here, and then email is going to be our authentication method. So let's just click finish. And now we can see we have a user table. And if we look in our API, we'll go into our default API group. Now we have user endpoints here, so we can retrieve a bunch of users. We can add a user, etc., etc. here. And then we also have auth endpoints for signing the user up, logging a user in, and then the /me is to retrieve user details. So back to Bubble, where it's asking for this group URL. That group URL is actually this right here. So this URL references this API group specifically. So of note here, if we add another API group, so let's say we add another API group here for we'll say contacts, right? Just hit save. This group based URL is different. Let me see this right there, is different than the one we have here in our default API group. So just something to keep in mind. You can manage that with the plugin, but generally you're going to want to set the base group URL here. This should be the URL that contains, or the group URL that contains your auth endpoints, right? So this default group contains our auth endpoints, so we're grabbing that and then we're pasting that here. Okay, perfect. That's all we need to do as far as setting up right now. We'll just do a kind of a quick overview here. So there's 3 elements in the plugin. One is Xano Auth. That's used to sign a user up, log a user in. It's what manages the actual persistence of the user session data across browser tabs and across time, page loads, and all that. Xano Query is an element that retrieves lists of items from your database, so more than one item from your database. And then the Xano Get is an element that retrieves a single record from your Xano database. So then we have a bunch of events here and actions. We'll jump into those in just a second. But we want to do one more thing. And let's go over here to Xano. And in the database, so this is the default user table that Xano has created for us. And it has name, email, password. And so we need to add 2 more fields. So we'll do a text field, and this will be name first. And then we'll have one, this will be name last. And then that is good. So I'm actually going to go right here into this API where it says sign up, because we're going to be passing this. Then we need to add this here as well. So let's add name first here, name last, because these 2 fields will get passed through. And so we're going to add this record. And so let's say, so name first is already being set up here. And then name, we're not actually passing this through in the plugin. So we're going to go ahead and create a concatenation here. So we'll say input is name first, and then let's use concat. Separator will be a space, and then name last will be, so that will concatenate the first and last name and go ahead and set that name, even though we're not passing that that parameter. And we can open this up and we can delete that out. Okay, so these are the details that we're going to be looking for on a sign up from the Bubble app. So let's dive back into Bubble and get this set up. Okay, so I have gone ahead and added login sign up UI here to the Bubble application. So we'll refresh this and we can see that we have first name, last name, email, password, and sign up button. And then we also already have an account, log in here. And so then that would be what we do, login. But then we're going to go back to, we're going to set up the sign up first. So let's say, go in here, go ahead and And let's use some good practices here. We'll say group name first, so we know which groups we're working with. Group name last. Group email. And group password. Okay, just a little bit of house cleaning there. All right, and so we have a single button. I'm just going to call this button login, but we're using this for both. Sign up and login, and we simply have a condition on this parent group. So this parent group is just of a type of number. By default, it's set to a data source of 1, and then we have a condition that says if the page path, the URL path, the last URL path is login, then we change it to a data source of 2, which we then show and hide different UI here. So the first name and last name are hidden by default, and they're only shown if the group is of number 1. So we're using that to manage our sign up and login functionality, and we're doing the same thing here with the button. So by default it says login, and then if the parent group's number is 1, it will say sign up. And so that's how we're managing this here between login and signing up. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Let's go ahead. First thing we need to do is we need to drop a Xano auth element directly on the page. So this will not be seen. And I've just got it here in the top left corner. I've got my page set to align to parent, which is great because that's just the way I set up all my pages so that I can place plugin elements on the page without messing up the UI. So then I'll normally have a group that contains all the content. But what we're going to do, let's go ahead. We're going to name this Xano auth. We'll just call it user, so we know what we're looking at. And then this element itself is going to expose a number of states to us. It's going to give us some events and some actions. So one of those actions is actually assign the user up action. So we'll click here on this button, and let's just turn this condition on so it looks like we're working with the right state. So we'll click on sign up, we'll hit start edit workflow, and then we're going to say only when parent group's number is 1. And that's simply because we know that with the parent groups, if the group's number is 1, the group that's containing the form, if its data source is 1, then we're in a sign up flow. So we'll say if parent group's number is 1, then we're going to say sign the Xano user up via a Xano auth. So we've tried to use terminology that's similar and familiar as a bubbler. You have to sign the user up. That's default with bubbles. This is sign the Xano user up. So we'll click on that, and this is only available. This action only becomes available when you actually have this this element on the page, and you want to have one of these elements on every page. No more than one, just one element, but every bubble page that you would have that a user is going to land on, or excuse me, a logged in user is going to land on, you want to have this element because this is what manages the persistence of that user session. Okay, so we're going to say sign the user up, and we're simply going to say first name, say his name first here. This is what I've named my inputs. Name last value, we'll say emails, value, and then password is passwords value. Okay, perfect. Then we really don't need to do anything more than that at this point to actually create our user. So I am going to listen for an event, and we're going to listen for a Xano auth user is logged in. So when we sign the user up, we're going to log them in. As soon as they're signed up, we're going to log them in. And so we'll set that there. And Let me just grab one more plugin for a simple notification. I use this plugin all the time. Love it. It's just simple and easy to use. So we'll say when a user is logged in, let's just create a toast here, and we'll say this Xano auth, and now we can see. So these are states that are exposed on this plugin element. We have auth token, we have first name, we have last name, we have email. Is logged in? Is it yes or no? Are they logged in? Are they not? Error message, error code, and then status code. So we do have an event here that is a Xano auth through an error. If that's the case, then the error message and error code would be populated. You can use those to, alert your user to what's going on and manage the UI that they're working with, manage your user's experience essentially. But we're going to go ahead and say, so when this user is signed up and logged in, let's just say this Xano auth's first name has been logged in. Okay. We'll go back into our Xano. Let's go ahead and look at our database. We can see there's no users, nothing has been set up here in our Xano database. And we'll refresh our page here. And let's just go ahead and say John, Appleseed. We'll call it John at appleseed.com. And then let's give him a password of John1234. All right. Click sign up. And you can see we have a toast that has been logged in. It did not grab the first name for some reason. But let's just double check, make sure that we created that user here in our Xano database. And we did. We have John Appleseed here, email, password, and we now have a logged in user on our Bubble app. Okay. But how do we know? We have no way of really knowing that this user is logged in. So let's just throw another, just a text element here with in the middle, and just kind of set it across the top so it's easy to see. I give it a width of 500. Let's just drop it off the top a little bit. Okay. So here, let's go ahead and grab Xano auth users, first name, and see Xano auth users last name, and then we'll say Xano auth user is logged in, and then let's just format that as text. So we'll say yes, they are logged in. And this will be no, they are not logged in. If we refresh this page, we can see that yes, they are logged in is here. And I know why we're not receiving their first and last name. So let's go back into Xano here. And we have to adjust our API on the auth.me endpoint. So we're returning this, getting the user, and let's just run this. I want to see what this response looks like. Okay, so yeah, we're returning the name and the email for this user, but we're not returning the first and the last name. So here in this get user, let's go to the output and let's click customize the response, and let's go ahead and check the name first and name last. hit save, and now we refresh. So you can see it already refreshed, and now it says John Appleseed. So this is our user, and they are logged in. You can see this does it refreshes when that tab becomes active. It went ahead and grabbed that additional data and pulled it right in. So pretty cool, huh? Okay. Now let's add a button here, and this UI is just going to get a little bit probably not pretty, but I'm going to, well, I'm going to set this, and we're going to say when Xano auth users is logged in, is yes, then this text will say log out. Okay, perfect. And no, let's not do that because I've got that on. I have an action on that already. That's dependent on a state of the group. So I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to say this element is visible. So we're going to create a new button here. So we'll say button log out, and then we'll make this invisible by default, and we'll say log out. Okay, and then let's actually add a condition on this other button to hide it when the user is logged in. All right, perfect. So we're gonna hide the sign up button when the user is logged in, and we'll show this other button. And so to log the user out, we'll just say start edit workflow, and there's another action in this plugin called log the Xano user out, and that's all it takes right there. But let's go ahead and set a when a Xano user is logged out event, and I'm just going to we'll just add another toast here, and let's just say warning, the user was logged out. All right, perfect. So we're going to refresh. So you can see it says John has been logged in. We just refresh the page. That action will run every time the page is loaded if the user is logged in. If the user is logged out, then it won't run. But you can see we have our log out button. So if we click log out, it says this user was logged out. We no longer have their name here, and it says no, they are not logged in. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and move on to the to log in a user in. So we're going to go back to, let's hide this log out button. We don't need him anymore. And we'll click on this sign up button. So let's actually set that to collapse when hidden. And we'll turn this condition off so that we're working with the login text. And so we'll click start edit workflow. In fact, let's just copy paste. So now we have when button login is clicked, and let's say parent group's number is 2. Then we're going to use, instead of the sign the user up, we're going to use the log the Xano user in via a Xano auth. We'll select the Xano auth element that we have. Email will be email and password, or email's value. Password will be password's value. These are referencing the inputs. So just to show you, I've just named the input email, right? This input is password. Okay, so that's all we need. Now we've got our login flow set up. So you can see the user was logged out. That will run. So you can use these events on page load to manage the state of your page and what you're displaying and what's on the Bubble's current user, which we'll get into in just a second. So let's say have an account array login here, and what was it? It was john@appleseed.com, and then the password was John1234. Hit login. Now you can see John has been logged in. John Appleseed, yes, they are logged in. So just like that, we have a sign up, login, log out flow, and we have access to the user's data. And if we go over here and go into the database, and let's just change him to Johnny Appleseed. We open this back up, you can see now it says Johnny Appleseed. Okay, so what do we do with this? I would recommend that this element is always tied in with Bubble's current user object or record, or you always have access to Bubble's current user, even if your user is not logged in to your Bubble application. Essentially, it's a cookie that Bubble manages, and it's accessible anywhere in your Bubble app. So one of the limitations here with this plugin is that while we have this Xano auth element on the page, that can't be accessed from like a reusable, right? So if we create a reusable and we want to get the user's first name, we don't have access to that. So, or if we want to actually use the, if we actually want to use the API connector to set up custom calls to Xano, you may need access to that auth token. So you can't access that unless we save it to the current user. Now, as far as retrieving data, logging in and logging out, that's all managed within the plugin. But if you want to set up separate API connector calls, then you have to have access to that auth token, and therefore you'd want to store that on the user. So my recommendation would be that on your actual user object in Bubble, that you would add, what's called name first, really duplicate fields. We're not going to actually create any records in your Bubble database for your user. We'll say name last. Let's say email. And, oops, okay, that's fine. Let's just say Xano email. Email is already a reserved field, so we can't create another one of those. And then I'm going to say auth token and save this as well. And then I would put one more state here, is logged in, right? Okay, so we have yes, no on that. And then here on our workflows, so where we have a Xano user is logged in, I'd make changes to the current user. So, oops, clicking too fast here. So make changes to current user. Let's just say add all fields, and auth token would be this Xano auth token is logged in. Is this Xano auth is logged in? Name first. You're following what we're doing here. Last name and then email. Perfect. Okay, and if you wanted, you could use the get element to get more data from your user, bring in more data, and save it that way. But this will give us now access. We can always reference the current user anywhere in our Bubble application. And now we can reference these details. So if we're in the middle of, we can be nested, in nested reusables, multiple levels deep, and still have access to current user's auth token, or current user's email, current user's name. I would also then here on the Xano user is logged out, just do the same thing. Let's paste that thing we just added, and then we'll just clear these out. In fact, there was absolutely no need to do that. Let's just say make changes to current user and add all fields. Perfect. And that would simply clear everything back out. You no longer have an authenticated user. You don't have any details for your user. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know why I'm recommending that you save that to the user. Now, I would recommend also that you go ahead and set up privacy rules and user's own data. This makes perfect sense. This user is current user. No one else needs access to that data. The only time you would need access to that data is if the current user is doing something. And so there you go. You have the user details in your Xano database. This is simply a way of allowing them to use authentication, etc., from the front end. Okay, very cool. So let's go ahead and try this out. And in fact, we're gonna go ahead and set up a workflow here that we should actually, not when they're logged out, when they are logged in, we should navigate. So we don't want to stay here on this page. So let's say go to page. We'll say go to page, and we'll just say go to page index, and we'll leave it at that. That's all we need. And so let's try this again. The user is logged in. All right, it's automatically redirecting to the index page. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and log this user out. I'm going to just drop a logout button here on. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to need to create a new page so we can access data anyway. And so let's go ahead and design this index page. So I am going to drop a group here at the top. Did I grab a floating group? I meant to grab a floating group. No, I didn't. Let's grab a floating group. We're going to say row, and let's go ahead and let this expand out. We don't really need any minimum width on that. And let's just say a min height of 50. And I'm going to jump into frames here actually, and I'm going to grab, oops, I think that was in the other. Just going to grab a page header and drop it in there. We'll grab this one. Right. So let's just give this some margin so it looks a little nicer. Margin padding. Oh dear. All right, there we go. All right, we'll get rid of the profile picture. We don't need that. Let's grab the first parent here. We'll center that vertically. We'll make this a logout button. All right, and this will just say, welcome back. And we're going to grab current user's name first and current user's name last. Perfect. All right, now we are on a separate page. So to actually access this data, we will need to drop a Xano auth element here. So we'll just drop it right there, and we're good to go. I'm going to add a logout action to this button and redirect back to the login page. So we're just going to use a log the Xano user out, and just going to add an event here. So Xano user is logged out. Let's just navigate. Let's go to page. I don't know why I keep trying to type navigate. Go to page, and then we're going to go back to you as the page name where my sign up is. And we'll just say login as the data that we're passing. All right, perfect. So if we update this, so welcome back, Johnny Appleseed. You can see it's right there. It's quick. We click log out. Now we're back here into our login page. Let's try this again. John@appleseed.com, and then John 1 2 3 4. Hit login. All right, now we're back on our index page where we have an authenticated user in Xano, and we're ready to actually collect some data from our Xano database. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's create some data here in our Xano database so that we have some data to retrieve. And to do that, I'm going to add another table and call this contacts. We'll just call it contact, I guess. And then we're going to add it to the contacts API group so that we can go over how to use a different API group URL. We'll click add table. And in this, we're going to need a name. We're gonna make all these text fields, say image. It's gonna be a text field. I'm just gonna save a URL there. I'm not gonna actually populate it with an image. And then let's see, we'll do email. And let's do position. All right, so let's go ahead and go into this API group and set up a new API endpoint, because I'm going to drop in some data here that I'm actually pulling from the Frames Dummy plugin. So this is a Frames Dummy data plugin that is part of the Frames extension. It has lots of fantastic dummy data to use, when you're building your applications. Definitely worth checking that out if you haven't. But I'm going to use, I'm just going to use some of the data from that plugin and populate this this contacts database. But first we need, so we have get, post, just add a contact record. Let's go ahead and open this, and honestly, anything I can do when I'm working in Xano, I would duplicate. Like I find something that's close and then clone it and make it what I need. So I need to create a bulk endpoint so that I'm not doing this a bunch of times. So I'm just going to clone this, and we'll call this contact bulk create. I would just say bulk. That's fine. Hit save. No, that's not going to let me do that. Okay, so let's just say we'll just say contact bulk. That works. I think there's a different way of doing that. I'd prefer to have it, but that's fine. We're going to delete this database link. We don't need that. And I'm actually going to set an input for contacts. And this is going to be an object. And then it's going to be a list. It's going to say a minimum of 1. And then we're going to go ahead and specify our data schema here. So we'll have name. As a text field, we'll have image as a text field. We will have email as a text field, and I will have position as a text field. All right, so this is just a little extra, not really part of what I was planning with the video, but I need to get some data in here, so you get to watch me do it. All right, so we're sending an object. This is our schema. It's a direct replica of the schema of our contact table. So let's remove this add record, and we're going to use this add multiple records in bulk, and it's going to be a contact. This is an amazing action. Makes things so simple. We're just going to set our items to be that input of contacts, and we're going to make this, oops, not that, contact. Yes. Okay, perfect. So if we go into our database, users, contact, see we don't have any contacts here. Just go ahead, dive into our API. We're going to open up that bulk endpoint, and now I am going to copy and paste an array of contacts. We're going to run this. All right, perfect. That should have done what we needed. It did. So we have names, images, emails, and positions. So we have 12 contacts that we can now use to, we can now get this information out of the database. All right, let's go back. We'll just go through reference. Let's go back to this get endpoint here, and let's make sure that this requires user authentication. Hit save, and let's just run and debug. Make sure this is working. All right, so we can see that this is working properly. It's returning the data that we need. And so we're going to jump back into Bubble and get this. So there's a couple of moving pieces here. We're going to use our Xano query. Just go ahead and drop this out here. And I will just give this a little bit top margin so we can actually see it over in addition to the auth element that we have here. So we have our Xano query, and you can see we can set a data type. Here we can set the endpoint. So we want to, so this endpoint actually we're going to grab right here. So we want it to be contact. Right, the group URL will be the group URL here for the contacts API. If we were using endpoint here in the default, since we've got that set in the actual plugin settings, then we wouldn't have to set this. But since we're using a different API group, we need to actually set the group base URL. So we'll go in here. We'll set that here. This body JSON, it can be left blank, but this is where you'll pass any kind of inputs, any kind of parameters that you're wanting to send to this endpoint, right? So if we were going to paginate these results, which we will in a little bit, we would set that up here. That will get sent through to that endpoint. But we still don't have our data type. So what we need is we cannot set up a custom JSON object in Bubble, but we can create APIs and API schemas via the API connector. So what we want to do is go actually into plugins, hit our API connector, and click add another API. Now for now, I'm just going to name this Xano Connector demo, right? Authentication doesn't matter. Just go ahead and expand the first call that is set there. And I'm going to name this Xano Contact. We don't need anything else here. Data action doesn't matter. But we're going to manually enter the response. And so the response that we're receiving for the contact, if we go back into this contact endpoint and we run this, this is the response we're getting this from this object, the data between these curly braces. So we want the JSON for that. So I'm just going to copy that and open JSON lint. And then we're going to copy just this part right here. Go back into Bubble. Click manually enter API response, paste it in there, and hit save. Now we can define what these fields should be read as. So created at needs to be a date, name's going to be a text, image. We could leave it as it is, but I'm going to go ahead and specify it as an image. Email, and then position. And now we have a Xano contact data type that has those fields in it that we can then reference from here. So we can now say Xano contact. This is the data type that we want to receive. And so through this Xano query element, and just to back up a little bit, imagine the Xano query element as the engine for your repeating group. So instead of doing your searches and everything and pagination directly on the repeating group is going to get its data from this Xano query element. Okay, we are set here on Xano query. We need a table here. to show this data. So let's jump into frames. And I'm just going to grab a table. Here, I'll grab this one. Paste it. All right, and let's go ahead and name these things so they make sense. And then this is going to be our group contact table. All right, and let's go ahead and push this to the top. Now, I would normally this would be inside a content group. I'm not doing that tonight. This is not a bubble. This is not a bubble training at all. So I'm talking, not paying attention. That should be a margin. It's not bubble training at all. So don't take what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to illustrate some things and going there the easiest way and the quickest way. But you wouldn't want to drop your elements like this directly onto an align to parent on the page. You would want to actually have a content group to manage the content of the group. But this will work for what we need now. All right, let's just change this title to contacts. Whoop, whoop. Right, and then I don't need that check. Let's go ahead and set up our data source. I'm going to clear that out, and you can see this is using. So actually, if we preview, we actually have a repeating group with data. This is using the Frames Dummy Data plugin, but we're going to clear that, and we're going to get this data from. Let's do Xano contact, and this is going to be Xano query A's data. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and set our. Let's open up our elements tree. What am I missing here? Oh, I don't need that. Let's get rid of that. All right, since we're not using that, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this group actually to parent level, delete that container, and now this will be, so parent group's contact, we're just going to change the type to Xano content or contact, and let's change all these to Xano contact. All right, perfect. And now we can set our data with parent group Xano contact. We'll say name, and then let's get parent group Xano contacts email, and we will get their position as well. Okay, so if we reload this, we should be receiving this data here into our repeating group. All right, we have an error here. What does this say? Expected a string, but got a number. All right, let me pause this. I'll be right back. Okay, so the issue that we had there was actually, I'm going to go ahead and show this to you. Here in this manually entered response, so we hit save here, and this was set to text. So Bubble was expecting a string response for the ID. The ID will be a number. The ID of the record coming back from Xano will be a number. So just make sure that the ID is set to number, and that's why it said expected a string but got a number, because it was actually returning a number. So we hit save there and refresh. And now we have our repeating group with data that's coming in from Xano. So this was supposed to be an email, not an image. So let's change this to email. And I'm going to change this as fixed number of rows. We don't need to have a fixed number of rows because we're going to manage all that separately. So we'll refresh, And there we go. So we have all our contacts right in here. Let's actually give this a max width so that it's easier to see. All right, perfect. Now we do have pagination down here. And so let's go ahead and set up the pagination for this repeating group. Okay, I'm not going to go into actually how to select each number. We're going to do just previous and next as far as total numbers or the actions for just paging back and forth. But you can set up for sure, go to specific pages as well. We just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and just delete. Doggone it. Sometimes it's easier just to go into the elementary. All right, we'll delete it. So we'll leave previous and next buttons here, and we'll get rid of that number system. Okay, so the first thing as far as setting up pagination in Bubble or in Xano is we have to go into Xano, and here on this query, so we're going to change the output of it, and we'll go here to the return. We'll click this little pencil icon for editing, and we'll click enable paging. So let's give it a default of 3 items per page, and we're going to say include metadata. Definitely want to include the metadata. The plugin will automatically take this metadata and expose it as states available to you on in the Bubble UI. But we're also, we're also going to say total item count. So let's hit save and click save. We do have to set up an input. So let's just, we're actually going to do this as an object. And let's say external, and then the parameter that one here. This is what. Let's just clear this out. This is what Xano. Go into Zapier and Xano. Let me grab a drink real quick. This is what Xano is looking for as far as paginating the response. They're looking for a parameter, and we'll just call it external, which is what they have in their docs. And then in this parameter, they're looking for a JSON object that looks like this. So for the page that you want, you just pass the page in as, we'll just pass it as a number, and then you can actually override the number of items you get back on a page per page, and you can do that by passing a per page number as well. So we'll just say 3. So this is the object. Get my face out of there. Oops, what did I do? Oh, I need there we go. So this is the object that Xano is looking for. So we're going to create this. So external, then we're going to add a page and then per page here. So the first one will be page. We'll say yes, that's required. Hit save, and then we'll do per page as well. That will not be required. And save it. So you can see we have an external parameter in there. We've defined an object of with a parameter of page and a parameter of per page. Okay, so if we go into query our records again, we'll look at the output. So the output is set to allow paging. Page 1 per page is 3, and then with metadata and totals. And then we'll go into external, and this is where we say, okay, to get the data for this for paginating this data, look here in the input, the external parameter. And then we also need to click this allow per page overwrite. Without clicking that, the per page parameter won't do anything. So we want to be able to manage the number of items per page as well. So let's go ahead and click save, and we'll hit run and debug, and let's just say give us page 1, We run. Uh-oh. What do we do? Let's include the variables here. Run, debugger. All right. Oh, it's sending the. Okay. That's actually we'll just add a value here. All right, perfect. So now we can see, so we received 3 items. Current page is 1, next page is 2, previous page is null. There's no value there. Total items is 12, and page total is 12. So we hit go back. I'll move my face again. And let's just change total items per page to 6. Hit run. Now you can see we have 2 pages. Items received was 6. And we're still receiving the first page. Okay. We're set up for pagination, and you can see this response is different, right? So without pagination, all we had was this array right here. Now with pagination, it's inside an items object. So the plugin will automatically read this. If it comes back paginated, it'll adjust for and collect the details or the data from the items and pull the metadata and expose that. So let's jump back into Bubble. And so the easy thing is to simply we'll set a state here on our repeating group, and let's just say we'll have 2 states. One will be page, and in fact, let's change that to number, because that's going to make us change something every time we set that state. And then let's set a per page. We'll make that number as well. And so let's just set some defaults. So 1, and we'll say 3, or 4 per page, that works. And then here on our previous and next buttons, so we expose, and let's pull this out. So we'll open a condition just to kind of see the states that are available on the Xano query. We have data, which is the list of data that we have we have returned. Error message, error code, that will be any error that we receive from the attempt that to retrieve the data. If we have an error, it will throw in it will trigger the event an error is thrown that's connected to this element as well. But then we have all this. So current page, next page, these are all numeric values. So current page is the page we're on, next page is the next page. Previous page is going to be the page to go back. Items received is the total items we received on this current page. Total items is the total amount of items, the total number of items we can retrieve. And total pages is total number of pages in that list at the number of pages that we're returning. So, or at the number of items we're returning per page. So you would use the total pages if you were going to create kind of what we were looking at earlier, where you have a list of numbers, a list of pages that can be gone into. So, if you know you have 12 total pages, maybe you show, pages, 1 to 6, and kind of allow people, or ultimately allow people to choose any page from 1 to 12, but you don't want to allow people to choose page 13 if there is no page 13. And so that's why that's back. So this raw JSON body, by the way, does return the entire response as text. So you can use that if it's easier to take that, manage your own JSON, have at it, that's there. But otherwise we return it as we're showing with virtual data. But this is all the metadata we have, right? So we can use this as conditions and actually what we use to set our state. So here on this previous button, I'm going to say when previous page, we'll just say when previous page is empty, then this element isn't clickable. You could say, isn't visible or whatever. We're actually just going to copy paste that, go to the next button, and let's say when next page is empty, the next button is not clickable. All right, and then we'll go ahead and add a workflow here to this previous button, and we're going to hit, we're going to set a state of an element, and we'll say that's going to be our repeating group, Xano contact. It's going to be our page. And we're going to say the page number that we want to go to is our Xano query. And that should be named, for the data that we're getting. So let's just go ahead and name that. We're going to say Xano query contact. Just as best practices, because in a general app, you're going to have multiple of these elements on a page, right? So we'll say Xano query contacts previous page. So that's the page we want to go to when we click on previous. And let's just copy, paste, say button next, and then we're going to change the state to Xano queries contacts next page. And you'll see how we're going to make this work here in just 1 second. So let's actually grab this JSON here. And so we're going to actually pass this directly here through the Xano query element. And we're just going to paste this JSON right here. And we're going to replace page number with this repeating group Xano contacts page. And we're going to replace per page with this repeating group Xano contacts per page value. Okay, technically this should work. I think I've got it set up properly, but just kind of recap. We're setting the JSON that we're passing through, or the body that we're passing through to this get endpoint is now using those states, the page and the per page states, to define for Xano that this is the page we want, this is the amount of items we want per page. So let's just hit refresh. We should have 4 items. So we have 4 items. We can't click preview because there's no previous page. If we click next, see we're going to the next page. All right, now we're at the end. We can't click next, but we can click previous. So we can page back. So let's actually add one more element here. Just grab an input, and this would just be, we'll say, this is going to be input per page. I'm going to give it 4, and then right click, start edit workflow. So that workflow would trigger when the input's value changes, and we're going to set a state again. And that state will be a repeating group, Xano contacts per page. It's going to be this input's value. Now let's change this input to a integer. Perfect. And that will get rid of our red text there. Okay, because the state is defined as a number, so we have to have the same, we have to have a matching value that we're setting it with. Okay, that is, let's, I don't know why it's not clicking well tonight. Let's give this some color so that it's more easily understandable that it's not clickable. And then we'll do the same with next. Font color. All right. So let's jump back in here. So you can see we have 4 items per page. Change that to 2. We have 2 items per page, 3, 6, and so on. So we can define the amount of items we have per page. Previous is grayed out. We can go to next. Now next is grayed out. Previous, we can go back to the previous page. You can see how powerful this is. It's quick. It works really well. You have the ability to define things as granular as you want. You can query items however you need to. Same way we're setting up this pagination. You can send the parameters for filtering and sorting and all that. And just something to know is that anytime, so you can see we're just changing states. We don't actually have to trigger anything here. We're just changing states. But anytime data in this field updates, the plugin will make a new API call and pull new data in. So it doesn't require a refresh, though there is a refresh action. We can add a button. Let's just actually do that. I'm going to just copy this logout button. We'll call this refresh. Let me make sure yep, okay, perfect. Let me make sure I didn't rename the wrong button. And so this will say refresh. And so here we can run a refresh action on the Xano query. So refresh data for a Xano query. Perfect. This is that's all it takes to refresh it. So if we look at it here, we'll just say we can see Ben Williams' name is Ben, and so let's go into the database, and we're just going to change it from Ben. Let's change it to Benjamin. And so this would be it's going to refresh every time I jump back in here now. Let's sort this differently. It's sorting by created date. Where's my API? Oh, here we go. Query, here we go. Oh, query. Let's just say sort by name. Okay, perfect. Now you can see when I pulled this back up, it actually automatically updated his name. And the reason is because when that screen goes from active to inactive and then back to active, it automatically refreshes this. So it's going to show Ben Williams now. But imagining your users on a page like this, it's not refreshing the page, and they send a change to a record, you can run this refresh action right after, and it'll immediately update the data that's being displayed with the new data that was just saved into the database. So we'll move on from there. There's one more item to show, and that's the Xano get element. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to just throw a pop-up on here. And we're going to make this pop-up of type Xano contact. So, and this is one of the nice things about doing this that you don't get working directly with the API connector anyway. It's quicker, it's easier doing it this way, but you can define a single virtual data type, and you can use it both for a single element and for a list of elements. If you've worked with the API connector, you know that you end up with get list type, and then or get one type. It's really kind of convoluted how you have to work with it. With this plugin, you can define that virtual data type as a single object, just like you do in the database, and then work with it that same object both in a list and as a single one. So we're going to set this as this pop-up data as Xano contact, and then we're going to actually drop one more. So we'll grab this Xano get, and I'll just put it right here in the middle so that, doggone it, where'd it go? Xano get. Let's move it down to the middle of the side so we can see it. Okay, perfect. Now Xano get retrieves a single element. And so we're going to retrieve Xano contact. And we're going to have to grab the same group URL that we're using to get the list because it's in the same API group. And if we look back here in Xano, let's go back into our API contacts. We have this contact this get contact ID. And so all we need from here is we need this same endpoint. We don't want to actually have we don't want to have the placeholder. We just want contact. So we'll say /contact, and then record ID is going to be the ID of the element that we want. So let's add one more state to the repeating group, and we'll just call this selected ID. This will be a number, and then we're going to set this record ID to the repeating group's selected ID. Okay, perfect. So we're going to set, I'm just going to add a click event to this. I'm going to add a click event to this group. When we click it, we're going to set a state to the repeating group, the selected ID, and it will be, we'll just say current sales Xano contact ID. And then we're going to show that pop-up. And so just walk through the workflow here. When we click this, we're going to set the ID for the record that we want from Xano. And then we're going to show the pop-up. When we select that ID, this element will automatically query this endpoint with this contact ID and return it as a Xano contact. And the pop-up here is referencing that element. Now it will be. I hadn't set that up. So it's going to be referencing this Xano get A's data. So again, we have the same thing. We have raw JSON body if you want to work with just the JSON. We have error code, status code. Data, it's going to be a single record. If we run this, let's just pass an ID of 1. It's going to be this response is what we're getting. That's going to get passed back here in the Xano get data, Xano gets data state. All right, so on this pop-up then, let's just give it actually some padding. So 20, 20, 20, and 20. And we'll drop text here. I don't like that text. I'm going to steal from this frames element here. We'll just call this contact details. Let's go to 600 on that. I know it doesn't really matter what this looks like, but it does bother me if it doesn't look, if it looks terrible. All right, so we'll drop this back to 400, and we'll say this will be parent groups Xano contact name. We'll get their email. Let's see, we'll get their position. And then let's actually go ahead and throw an image on here. So dang, so big. Just keep the aspect ratio, and then this will be parent groups contact image. All right, cool. Let's just zoom it in. All right, that's good enough. Okay, so that should work. And it's just refresh. And we'll click on Andrew Finnegan. Boom, there we go. And yep, that's it as far as retrieving single records, retrieving list of records, logging the user in, signing the user up. We can still log the user out. It'll take us back. And in fact, if we just to test the authentication, because we are requiring authentication, let me make sure this is not going to kick us back out. Xano user is logged out. Let me just disable that. I'm going to go back here, refresh, and you can see we can't retrieve any data. I should have an error here. Unauthorized authentication is required. So the authentication is working. If we go back, log back in, John at appleseed.com. We log back in, and now we have our data back. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Hopefully this element, this Xano connector plugin works super well. Really would love to hear from any feedback from you, any questions, any suggestions. But hopefully it helps you connect quickly and simply with Xano. Xano is a fantastic product. So carry on, keep bubbling, and let me know if you have any questions.